A nursing home within 6 months, 3 months, say, well, can't they give away like $14,000 to each of us? The answer is no, by the way. All right. What is good for the estate tax purposes, if you're over $1 million, is to do the gifting if you can and want to do it. It'll help your estate tax situation. For nursing home purposes, it's very bad. Go ahead.
Yeah, you said something about the 401k. It's not a good idea to put it into a trust.
Right.
Why is that?
The question is, why is it not a good idea to put a 401k into a trust? Because there are all kinds of ways that you can screw up, and if it's not done right, your beneficiary could be forced to take out the entire amount in a single year. So if you have a 401k with $300,000 and it all becomes taxable in 1 year, guess what? It's as if they made $300,000 but whatever their other income was. So I just think there are too many pitfalls. I'm not saying not to do it, and there's probably some lawyers who would advise doing it. I tend to err on the side of caution. Don't want to make somebody have a $300,000 a year hit. Okay? All right. So unless I have any other questions on estate taxes, we're moving right along here. Go ahead.
In relation to what she said, I have a 401, an IRA.
Okay.
My wife is a beneficiary.
Okay.
So does the same thing apply to her, that it would be a lump sum distribution?
It's a different question. The question is lump sum distribution to a spouse. All right. Once again, you're not talking about putting in a trust, which was her question. What you're talking about, if it's going to your spouse, which is the most common situation, obviously that's what you want to do, because she can then take the distribution over her actuarial life expectancy and minimize taxes. So a little bit different a question. Okay? Stop me before I go on to Medicaid. Go ahead.
One question about trusts. If a trust generates income, is that taxable?
Yes. Just like any other income. Just like a bank account. All right. Third, yeah, go ahead.
How does the 529 plans fit into this estate plan?
It's an interesting question. The bottom line is it's part of your taxable estate 529 plan. It's a countable asset. I don't know how to answer further than that. All right, if you have more specifics afterwards, I'll talk to you about it. All right, go ahead.
You mentioned IRAs, but what about retirement money that you put away? How does that work?
Retirement monies basically are IRAs. IRAs are different, there's different forms. There's 401s, 403Bs. When I say IRAs, just retirement, stuff that hasn't been taxed yet, that will be taxed when it comes out.
Retirement is taxed, right?
I'm sorry, what?
The retirement savings is taxed, right?
Well, the retirement savings are taxed because generally, except for Roth IRAs, what you put in there hasn't been taxed. And when it comes out, it gets taxed, either by you taking it out, your beneficiary taking it out. Okay? All right, I'm going to move on to the scary area. This is what's called Medicare, Medicaid, nursing home issues. All right? And there's a lot of misunderstandings in this area. But the thing to know is this. Because somebody has to go into a nursing home, the state doesn't take your house or take your money. They just say they're not going to pay for your care unless you financially qualify. And to financially qualify, as a spousal couple, you're allowed to have basically $120,000 and a primary residence. As a single individual, you're allowed to have $2,000, and that includes the value of a residence. All right, so it's not that they're going to take stuff, it's just that you have to qualify for it, and you can't have very much to qualify for it. All right, so a little bit about nursing homes, Medicare, Medicaid, which gets a lot of people confused. People say, well, Medicare will cover the nursing home. All right, that's not correct. Medicare is designed for what's called rehabilitative care. You're functioning up here, you have a spell of illness, you're injured. Medicare provides the services, Part A, hospitalization, Part B, outpatient, to bring you back up, close to back up to where you were. Your Medicare pays for that, senior health care. All right? If it comes to pass through time and age that you can't really be rehabilitated, Medicare, which is designed for rehabilitation, cuts out. All right? and then you're classified by a medical staff as what's called custodial care. And custodial care doesn't receive Medicare. Very limited on a nursing home basis. If you come from a hospital after a 3-day stay, often they'll pay for the first 20 days, often they'll pay for part of the first 100 days, but very rarely longer than that. All right? So, facts on nursing homes. They say that 1 in every 2 women, statistics, goes into a nursing home at the end of her life. 1 in every 3.5 to 4 men. Always looking for that half a man. All right. Everybody tells me, well, I'll never go into a nursing home. I'll shoot myself. I'll take a gun. I'll have my daughter shoot me. Guess what? Lots of people end up there anyway because there's nobody to care for them, or the people to care for them are overtaxed. It just can't be done. So people are there. All right. Average length of stay in a nursing home in Massachusetts, people disagree about statistics, but I've heard generally between 2.5 to 3 years. Women tend to last longer than men there, and obviously there's a lot more women there than men there. Average cost of a nursing home in Massachusetts in the year 2015, anybody want to venture to guess?
$55,000.
All right. We're up in the $100,000 area. You're probably talking average cost, you're looking at $11,000 to $15,000 per month. All right, so whatever that translates to. So obviously do the math. It's not great. All right, so what can you do to protect yourself or to protect your assets? All right, well, obviously people are familiar with long-term care insurance. It's like life insurance, but only for long-term care. I'm not here to really advise one way or the other. Obviously people know that it's expensive. The older you get or the unhealthier you are, the more it costs. But if you're really paranoid about it, it's something to consider. You can pay privately. Not a great option until you get down to the thresholds. And then you qualify for state assistance. Or you can qualify for state assistance. But how do you do that? I just said, couples allowed to have a primary residence and $120,000 of assets. And that includes all assets, by the way. All right. One thing, as a spousal couple, if you're not seriously over that threshold, maybe you have $500,000. You probably heard these ads on the radio. You know, you can qualify for state assistance even if you're in a nursing home, your spouse is in a nursing home. And basically, that's true. All right, if it's not abused. What one spouse can do who's not going in is you can convert excess assets into an immediate annuity for the spouse who's not going in. Say you have $400,000. So you say $300,000 over the limit. You can take a lump sum of $300,000 and do an immediate annuity for the spouse who's not going in, gets you from $400,000 under the threshold of $100,000, and that spouse can qualify. So that's something that can be done, in my opinion. That's something that should not be done unless or until you're facing the certainty of nursing home cost. All right? And if you are facing the certainty of nursing home cost and it's a reasonable thing, there's no reason not to do it. All right? So that's what that's all about. All right? Other ways to protect assets, bank accounts, real estate. Gentleman mentioned an irrevocable trust before. If you have an irrevocable trust, truly irrevocable, where you give up what's called access, use, and control of the principal of the trust, and that asset is in there for 5 years, if you go to a nursing home, it's as if you didn't have that asset. All right? So with irrevocable trusts, we sort of have to be careful. You have to be sure, number one, that what you're giving up, you can give up. Because theoretically, you can't have access to that principal, and you have to make sure you have enough funds to carry you for the 5 years, should you have to go, because you've eliminated yourself from state assistance. But say you have $1 million of cash, and you have an extra $500,000 that you know you're never going to use, you throw that into an irrevocable trust, you retain the $500,000 under your own name if you need nursing home care, and after 5 years, that $500,000 that you've put into the irrevocable trust is protected. You can have access to the income that that generates, just not to the principal. Okay? Most common thing we put into an irrevocable trust is real estate. It's the easiest thing to do. All right, you put your house in the irrevocable trust. If it's there for 5 years and you otherwise have to apply for nursing home, it's as if that asset doesn't exist. It's protected. All right. I will tell you this. If you can do an irrevocable trust, if your situation allows, it's not a bad thing to do. But you've got to be careful because Mass Health Medicaid is giving us a real hard time about irrevocable trusts at this point in time. And what they're basically saying is if the person who makes the trust, the grantor, has any access at all in any way to the principal of that trust, they'll consider it no good. So the trust has to be well written. In my own particular trust, I say about 50 times, grantor has no access to the principal. So it's just, if you do one, you got to be careful and make sure it contains that, in my opinion, over and over again. Okay. One thing I'll mention in particular for the protection of real estate, and it's probably the most common thing, there's about 5 things you can do with real estate. Only 2 of them works for Medicaid or nursing home purposes. People say, well, I'll put the house in my kids' names, and if 5 years passes, my house is protected. Guess what? That's true. But it's also in your kids' name. If they have a problem, you can lose the house. So that's something we never do. I had a gentleman call me and said, well, I gave the house to my daughter. She encumbered a mortgage. Now they're foreclosing. What can you do for me? I said, I can't do anything for you. You made her the current owner. You do not make your kid, as much as you may like him or her, the current owner or a joint owner of your house. It's fraught with difficulties. All right? You can put a house in a trust, a living trust, helpful for avoiding probate, useful for estate tax purposes, particularly for spousal couples, but of no benefit for Medicaid nursing home purposes. All right? You can do an irrevocable trust. If it's in there for 5 years, the house will be protected. Once again, got to be careful about the language. The most common thing we do is something called a life estate. And what a life estate does is it divides the ownership between a current owner, who is you and your spouse, and a future owner, who are your kids. Your kids have no current interest, so if they have a problem, bankruptcy, divorce, whatever, it generally will not affect you. All right? They do have a future interest, however, so if you need to reverse the deed or decide to sell, you need their okay. As long as you have the cooperation of your kids, there's really no downside to a life estate. As long as you have their cooperation, you can always undo it if you need to, unlike an irrevocable trust. For nursing home purposes, a life estate also picks up a 5-year disqualification period. But unlike an irrevocable trust, if one of the spouses doesn't make the 5 years, you can always reverse the life estate and you haven't lost anything, you just haven't gained what you otherwise would have. All right? I do life estates with couples a lot. You say, well, I don't understand. You can, if you have a couple, if one goes in, you can put the house in the other person's name, which is true. But this is the concern. If you have a spousal couple and the primary residence is a major asset, we try to do a life estate to get the clock ticking for both people for the 5 years. Now, if a woman comes to me and her husband's just died and says, okay, I want to do that life estate now, guess what? She's got to make the 5 years. And if she has not enough other assets and she has to go into a nursing home, she's going to lose the house. Single individuals are very vulnerable to that if they don't have a lot of cash assets. All right. With this, if we put the house in when the husband and wife are still around, husband dies 3 years down the road, guess what? Wife only has to make 2 years. So that's why it makes sense to do it if you're both still around. Now, a life estate, if you go into a nursing home and you otherwise qualify for state assistance, the state can still put a lien on the house. However, if the house is held until your death, the lien goes away because the state can only collect from the probate estate. And when you do a life estate, which in essence is giving your house named beneficiaries like a bank account, your kids, it's not in your probate estate. All right, so once again, your 2 methods, irrevocable trust and life estate for protecting assets and real estate from nursing home costs.